All right, let's get right into it. Today we're going to break down some really powerful features in TypeScript and Angular. You know, the kind of stuff that can look a little scary at first, but is absolutely essential for writing clean, pro-level code. We're going to pull back the curtain and make it all make sense.
Oh, and one quick thing before we dive in, this is a fast-paced overview, right? We're focusing on the ideas. If you want to grab any of the code and play around with it, I've dropped all the full examples down in the description below, so no need to pause and type everything out.
So here's the game plan. We're going to start with how to create super flexible types in TypeScript. Then, we'll see how to handle that flexibility safely with something called type guards. From there, we'll jump into the real magic, decorators, and see how Angular turns them into total power tools. And finally, we'll wrap up with the best ways to keep all this awesome code organized. Okay, first things first, let's talk about how TypeScript lets us create variables that aren't stuck with just one single type. This is a real game changer. So first up, we've got something called a union type. And that little pipe symbol, the vertical line, that's the key. It basically means or. So this line of code is telling TypeScript, hey, this value variable, it can be a string or it can be a number. This is a lifesaver when an API might send you an ID as either the number 123 times or the string 123. You can handle both, no problem. Now, on the other side of the coin, you've got intersection types. See that ampersand? That means and. This isn't about giving you options, it's about combining things. The Swiss Army knife analogy is perfect here. If type A is a knife and type B is a can opener, an intersection type makes a new thing that has both the knife and the can opener. It's got to have everything from all the types you mash together. So let's just nail this down because it's super important. Union types are about options, this or that. Intersection types are about combination, this and that. One gives a variable flexibility, the other builds a new, stronger type by combining features.
Okay, so we've got these cool variables that can be a string or a number. But that begs the question, right? How do you actually use them without your code blowing up? Well, that's exactly what type guards are for.
A type guard is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a check that happens while your code is running to figure out what type of variable currently is. It's basically your code pausing and asking, okay, I know you could be a few different things, but what are you right now? And this example shows it perfectly. You see that if statement, the type of value equals string part? That is the guard. Inside that first block, TypeScript is now 100% positive that value is a string. So calling .toUpperCase on it is completely safe. And in the else block, it knows it must be a number, so calling .toFixIt is also safe. This simple check just saved us from a potential crash. All right, so we've got flexible types, and we know how to check them safely. Now let's get into something a little more mind-bending, but way more powerful. Decorators. This is where we start talking about code that can actually change other code. So what is a decorator? Don't let it scare you. At the end of the day, it's just a function. But it's a special one, you know? With the little @ symbol in front, you stick it on top of a class or a method, and it runs behind the scenes to add extra information or functionality to it. Take a look at this. It's super simple. We have a function called logger, and we're just attaching it to the person class with that @ symbol. That's it. Now, the logger function will automatically run when our person class is first defined. The really cool part here is that we're adding functionality to the class without ever touching the code inside the class. So you're probably looking at that and thinking, okay, it's a function that runs automatically. What's the big deal? Well, believe it or not, this simple idea is the absolute foundation of how modern Angular applications work. Yeah, the big deal is that Angular takes this simple decorator concept and turns it into a whole set of power tools. These little @ symbols are basically how we tell Angular what every single piece of our code is supposed to do. These four right here, they're the backbone of pretty much any Angular app you'll ever see. So instead of writing a ton of boilerplate code, you just slap one of these decorators on your class. @component says, hey Angular, this is a piece of the user interface. @injectable says, this is a service with some logic we can share. You're just telling Angular what a thing is, and it handles all the complicated stuff for you. Let's zoom in on @component for a sec, because it's the one you'll see the most. This decorator takes a boring old class and gives it superpowers. That selector tells Angular, anywhere you see an app-home tag in the HTML, I want you to put this component. And template uRtl says, oh, and by the way, here's the HTML file you should use for it. That one little decorator is the magic glue that connects our code to what the user actually sees. Okay, last piece of the puzzle. We've got all these cool components and services and types. How do we keep it all organized so it doesn't turn into a giant mess? The answer, and the way everyone does it now, is with modules. And the rule of thumb is super simple. One file, one module. That's it. If you build something cool in one file and you want to use it in another, you export it from its home file and then you import it wherever you need it. It keeps everything clean and easy to follow.
Now, you might also bump into something called namespaces. This is an older way of doing things. The key thing to remember here is that this was designed for organizing a bunch of code that was all living together inside one giant file. It was a way to create little boxes for your code so their names wouldn't clash.
So, to really drive it home, modules are for organizing your code across many different files. That's the modern way. Namespaces, that's the older way for grouping things that are all stuck inside just one file. For any new project, you're going to be using modules, for sure.
So there you have it. We started with making our types more flexible with unions. Then we learned how to check those types safely with guards. And finally, we saw how decorators tie it all together to tell the Angular framework exactly how to build our application. These aren't just tricks, they're the building blocks of professional, scalable apps. So the only real question is, what are you going to build with them?